These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host, Bill Monty.
Hello and welcome back to Tales from South Florida. I'm your host, Bill Monty, and every week we travel back in time to meet the people, places, and moments that shaped our corner of the Sunshine State. Today I want to tell you about a woman whose name you might know from a school or a street sign, but whose true story is bigger, wilder, and bolder than you might think. She was the fierce defender of Florida's wildest places. Her name was Marjory Stoneman Douglas, and she's the reason the Everglades still exist as we know them today. So settle in, and let's take a talk down memory lane, back to a time when South Florida was changing fast, and one woman refused to let it disappear under concrete and canals. Marjory Stoneman Douglas was born all the way back in 1890 in Minneapolis. Her childhood, well, not exactly a fairy tale. Her parents split up when she was young, and she spent a lot of time bouncing between relatives. Marjory's father, Frank Bryant Stoneman, was a pioneer in Florida journalism. After the divorce from his wife, he moved south at the turn of the century, chasing opportunity and the dream of a booming Miami. He became the first editor of what would become the Miami Herald. While young Marjory stayed behind in Massachusetts with her mother, who struggled with mental illness, Frank was sharing public opinion and fighting corruption in a city that was still finding its identity. When Marjory grew up and graduated from Wellesley in 1912, she struck out on her own and quickly got tangled up in a disastrous marriage. His name was Kenneth Douglas. He swept Marjory off her feet with fancy stories and big promises. But Kenneth was not who he claimed to be. He was a fraudster and a smooth-talking bigamist who manipulated her emotionally and financially. Once she discovered the truth, Marjory left him, scandalous for the time. But it taught her self-reliance, and she never did remarry, because in her own words, that brief heartbreak freed her to live life entirely on her terms. Ironically, she kept the last name Douglas, maybe because it gave her independence from her father's identity when she too moved down to Miami, and maybe because she already started to build her own reputation. After the marriage collapsed, Marjory did move to Miami in 1915 to work for her father at the Miami Herald, and there she found her voice, writing stories, covering politics, and falling in love with Florida's unique landscapes. She was sharp-tongued, sharp-minded, and completely unwilling to back down. Now, you have to remember, back then, the Everglades were not a national treasure. Most people saw them as a mosquito-infested wasteland that needed to be drained and paved over for farmland and homes. Swamp reclamation was the big promise. Dry it out, build it up, sell it off. But Marjory did not see a swamp. She saw a unique, fragile ecosystem unlike anywhere else in the world, and she was determined to help others see it too. In 1947, the same year that Everglades National Park was established, if you want to learn more about that and John Pennekamp Park, go back to the episode about John Pennekamp Park. I'll put the link in the show notes. Marjory published her book in 1947, the one that would change everything, The Everglades, River of Grass. She argued that the Everglades weren't just stagnant water. They were a slow-moving river flowing from Lake Okeechobee all the way down to Florida Bay. It is hard to overstate how radical that idea was back then. That simple idea, that river of grass, captured the public's imagination. It made people realize that draining the Everglades was not harmless. It was killing something alive. Now, you'd think after that accomplishment, that would be enough for Marjory Stoneman Douglas. I mean, she was nearly 80 years old, yes, 80, when she founded an organization called Friends of the Everglades. Developers, politicians, and powerful sugar companies were still draining wetlands, building canals, and pumping chemicals into the water, despite the book's popularity and despite public outcry. Marjory? She showed up at every city council meeting, every public hearing, and every press conference, wearing her big hats. That was kind of her trademark, along with her pearls. And at every meeting that she showed up at, she gave them hell. She was famous for cutting pompous officials down to size with one sentence. One time, a reporter asked her how she felt about being called a nuisance. She fired back, "Be a nuisance where it counts, but don't be a bore at any other time." That was Marjory. Polite, witty, and relentless. Her efforts were not in vain. Over the decades, her voice inspired countless Floridians to fight for the Everglades, push for stronger laws, and protect this vast, slow-moving river of life. When people said she was too old to make a difference, she proved them wrong time and time again. She testified before Congress in her 80s and then in her 90s. She wrote letters and editorials until the very end. Marjory Stoneman Douglas, this unique lady, passed away in 1998 at the incredible age of 108 years old. Think about it. She saw Florida transform from a mosquito swamp with dirt roads to a bustling, sprawling urban giant, and she never stopped fighting to save a piece of its wild soul. Today, her name lives on in schools like Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School, in parks, and in the hearts of every Floridian who loves the Everglades. You can visit the house that she lived in Coconut Grove. And next time you see that endless sea of grass stretching to the horizon, take a moment to thank Marjory Stoneman Douglas, because without her, much of it might have been drained, bulldozed, and forgotten long ago. She taught us a simple truth, that what we think of as worthless can turn out to be priceless if we care enough to protect it. I want to thank you for spending a few minutes with me today remembering a true South Florida legend. If you enjoyed this story, please follow Tales from South Florida. Leave a quick review and a rating. Leave a comment. You can scroll down in the show notes and you can leave me a voice message, 90-second voice message on SpeakPipe. I'd love to hear from you. Your memories of Marjory Stoneman Douglas, if you ever met her or knew her, or your memories of visiting the Everglades or enjoying the Everglades, that unique ecosystem that exists nowhere else in the world. And please remember, if you can, to share Tales from South Florida with a friend who loves a good bit of Florida history. Next week, I've got another tale lined up, one that involves, well, you're just going to have to subscribe to be sure that you're reminded of when that episode drops to find out what we'll be talking about. So stay tuned. Until then, this is Bill Monty, reminding you to cherish the wild, wonderful places we're lucky enough to call home. Until next time, my friends, as always, I remind you, be safe and be kind. And be sitting back right now to enjoy our wonderful theme song. By now, you should be able to sing along.
Let's take a talk down memory lane, 'cause the stories around here are just insane. Pirates World, the Sporto and Wolfies too, Palm Beach to Key West, that's where we grew. These are the tales from South Florida for you, with your host Bill Monty.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Does the news cycle make you feel like you're on a tilt-a-whirl of outrage? Feeling like your brain is a political piñata getting whacked 24/7? There's an antidote. Outrage Overload is the podcast where we hit the pause button on the outrage train. We dissect the headlines, peel back the layers of negativity, and explore the science behind why you keep wanting to throw your phone at the wall. Before you lose another brain cell to outrage fatigue, check out the Outrage Overload podcast at outrageoverload.net or wherever you get your podcasts.